Frasier wasn't just a sitcom, it was pure nostalgia, intelligent humor, cozy moments, and voices that felt like home. But behind the laughter were dark tragedies no one ever talked about. Broken marriages, addiction, and terrifying brushes with death followed the cast-off screen. What really happened to them? Join us as we uncover the lives you never saw and honor the legacies they left behind. Kelsey Grammer as Frasier Crane. To many viewers, Frasier Crane was confidence, culture, and control, the man who always had the right word at the right moment. Kelsey Grammer was 38 years old when he stepped into Frasier in 1993, bringing maturity and gravity to a role that would quietly redefine television comedy. However, in real life, he was anything but. Grammer was born on February 21, 1955, in St. Thomas, U.S. Virgin Islands, into a childhood fractured almost from the start. His parents divorced when he was just 2, leaving him to grow up without emotional stability, moving between relatives and environments shaped by uncertainty and financial strain. That sense of impermanence followed him everywhere, planting anxiety long before fame ever arrived. Then came the losses that would define his life. His father was murdered during a home invasion when Kelsey was still a teenager. Years later, his younger sister Karen was kidnapped, raped, and brutally killed, an event so devastating that Grammer personally testified in court to face her killer. As if grief were not enough, 2 half-brothers later died in a scuba diving accident. These compounded tragedies pushed him into deep depression, cocaine addiction, alcoholism, and repeated encounters with the law. Paradoxically, his darkest years unfolded alongside extraordinary success. While Frasier dominated television and earned him multiple Emmy Awards, Grammer cycled through turbulent marriages, public breakdowns, and behind-the-scenes interventions just to keep him functional on set. His career highlights, Cheers, Frasier, and later the acclaimed Drama Boss, stood in sharp contrast to a private life marked by chaos, guilt, and relentless self-destruction. By 2026, Kelsey Grammer is 71 years old, still acting, producing, and returning to iconic roles while speaking openly about faith, forgiveness, and survival. With an estimated net worth of around $80 million, largely built from Frasier's historic salary and syndication, he stands as one of television's most successful figures. David Hyde Pierce as Niles Crane. In the show, Niles Crane earned it through silence, tension, and restraint. David Hyde Pierce was 34 years old when he joined Frasier in 1993, stepping into the role of Frasier's younger brother with precision that felt almost surgical. Where others played for laughs, Pierce played for truth, and audiences felt it instantly. Born on April 3, 1959, in Saratoga Springs, New York, Pierce grew up in a household shaped by discipline and expectation. His father was an aspiring actor, his mother worked in insurance, and academic excellence was quietly demanded rather than celebrated. Though his childhood was relatively stable, pressure and self-doubt followed him early, pushing him toward music, literature, and eventually theater as a form of escape. After graduating from Yale, Pierce did not walk into success. He worked for it slowly and painfully. He sold ties at Bloomingdale's, worked as a security guard, and auditioned endlessly in New York while performing off-Broadway. Even after landing Frasier, success came with a cost. The risk of being trapped as the neurotic intellectual, a label that could easily end a career rather than define one. Pierce chose a different path. While Frasier earned him 4 Emmy Awards, he quietly redirected his energy toward Broadway, winning a Tony Award for Curtains, and building a second career rooted in craft rather than celebrity. Personally, he navigated years of speculation about his sexuality before publicly coming out, later marrying writer Brian Hargrove in a relationship marked by stability rather than scandal. His advocacy for Alzheimer's awareness, shaped by illness within his family, revealed a deeper fear of memory, loss, and erasure. In 2026, David Hyde Pierce is 67 years old, actively working in theater and selective screen projects, having declined the Frasier revival to protect the character's legacy. With an estimated net worth of around $40 million, earned through Frasier and decades on stage, he represents a rare kind of success. Jane Leeves as Daphne Moon. Daphne Moon arrived on Frasier like a gust of warmth, earthy, intuitive, and unapologetically herself. Jane Leeves was 32 years old when she brought grounded charm to the show's sharp intellect. Her Mancunian accent and quirky confidence made Daphne feel instantly real. What looked effortless on screen, however, was the result of years spent proving she belonged. Born on April 18, 1961, in Ilford, Essex, England, Jane Elizabeth Leeves grew up in a working household shaped by discipline and quiet pressure. Her family relocated during her childhood, creating emotional restlessness. While ballet training demanded technical precision she sometimes struggled to master. Her early career was anything but smooth. Leeves started with small roles in British television and dance work, then moved to the U.S., where progress slowed to a crawl. Years passed with minor appearances on shows like Seinfeld and Murphy Brown, auditions that went nowhere, and pilots that never aired. Daphne Moon was a long overdue reward. As Frasier grew into a phenomenon, Leeves earned Emmy and Golden Globe nominations, yet life continued quietly behind the scenes. Her real pregnancy was written into the show in a sensitive human way, mirroring the shift from ambition to balance. Later roles in Hot in Cleveland and The Resident showed her ability to evolve beyond sitcom comfort, choosing longevity over constant reinvention. By 2026, Jane Leeves is 65 years old, still respected, selective, and active, balancing work with family life away from chaos. With an estimated net worth of around $10 million built through long-running series and steady choices, her story isn't about scandal or collapse. Peri Gilpin as Roz Doyle. Roz Doyle never apologized for taking up space. She was sharp, direct, and emotionally fearless. Peri Gilpin was 32 years old when she brought lived-in strength to a role that could easily have been a stereotype. Instead, Roz became the show's emotional anchor. And that strength came from somewhere very real. Born on May 27, 1961, in Waco, Texas, Gilpin's childhood was marked by instability and early loss. Her parents divorced when she was young, and frequent moves between Houston and Dallas left her searching for grounding. The deepest fracture came at 22, when her father died in a sudden skydiving accident that reshaped her sense of safety and permanence overnight. Her path into acting was turbulent. Gilpin was expelled from the University of Texas acting program, forcing her to rebuild her confidence abroad in London before returning home to scrape by as a makeup artist and theater apprentice. Frasier came only after she beat out hundreds of actresses for Roz Doyle, turning rejection into momentum rather than bitterness. Success did not shield her from grief. While Frasier earned her a Screen Actors Guild Award and later work like Make It or Break It kept her visible, cancer quietly ravaged her family. Her mother died in 1997, her sister in 2020, and her brother in 2023, all losses that pushed Gilpin toward advocacy and long-term support for cancer research. Her marriage to artist Christian Vincent and the birth of twins via surrogacy offered stability amid cumulative sorrow. In 2026, Peri Gilpin is 65 years old, still working, still voicing characters, and still returning to Roz when the story truly calls for it. With an estimated net worth of around $8 million, earned through Frasier, television, and voice acting, her legacy is not just toughness on screen. John Mahoney as Martin Crane. Martin Crane carried stubbornness, tenderness, and old wounds in equal measure in the movie. John Mahoney was already 53 years old when he took on the role of Martin Crane, and that life experience seeped into every gesture. What audiences saw as effortless warmth was, in truth, lived history. Born on June 20th, 1940 in Blackpool, England, Charles John Mahoney grew up surrounded by instability shaped by World War II. His family was evacuated from Manchester during the bombings, and the emotional aftershocks never fully faded. At home, his parents' marriage was cold and brittle. Watching that dynamic taught Mahoney early on that conflict could be devastating. Unlike most actors, Mahoney did not chase fame in his youth. He emigrated to the United States at 18, served in the U.S. Army, earned a master's degree in English, taught school, and worked as a medical editor before daring to reinvent himself. Only later did he find his artistic home with Chicago's Steppenwolf Theater, where discipline replaced fear. That path led to a Tony Award for The House of Blue Leaves and powerful film roles such as Primal Fear, long before television ever noticed him. Away from the camera, Mahoney lived cautiously. He never married and had no children, later admitting that the shadow of his parents' unhappy marriage made intimacy feel dangerous. His body carried its own battles: colon cancer in the 1980s, then throat cancer diagnosed in 2014. Even weakened, he returned to the stage repeatedly, driven by devotion to the craft rather than ambition. John Mahoney passed away on February 4, 2018, at the age of 77 due to complications from throat cancer in hospice care in Chicago. With an estimated net worth of around $16 million, earned through Frasier, film, and decades of theater, his legacy rests elsewhere. Martin Crane became television's most believable father because the man who played him understood restraint, loss, and love without needing to explain it. Dan Butler as Bulldog Briscoe. Bulldog Briscoe stormed into scenes like a force of nature, loud, crude, reckless, and unforgettable. Dan Butler was 39 years old when Bulldog first exploded onto Frasier, channeling exaggerated bravado into something both hilarious and unsettling. On the surface, Bulldog felt cartoonish. Beneath it, the performance cut far closer to the bone. Born on December 2, 1954, in Huntington, Indiana, Butler grew up in a stable middle-class household in Fort Wayne. His father worked as a pharmacist, his mother stayed at home, and outwardly nothing seemed broken. But identity struggles formed quietly, without language or permission to surface. Acting became the one place where excess, contradiction, and emotional extremes were allowed. Before television fame, Butler was shaped by the stage. Theater taught him discipline, control, and how to weaponize energy. Frasier made him recognizable, but his range stretched far beyond Bulldog, from Roseanne to voice work as Mr. Simmons on Hey Arnold. While audiences laughed at Bulldog's hyper-masculinity, Butler was privately questioning what masculinity had cost him. That reckoning eventually became public through his one-man play, The Only Thing Worse You Could Have Told Me. By coming out as gay through art, Butler reframed Bulldog entirely. The bluster was armor, not identity. Over time, honesty replaced performance, and stability followed. By 2026, Dan Butler is 72 years old, respected in theater and forever associated with one of Frasier's most chaotic characters, even returning to the role decades later. With an estimated net worth of around $5 million, earned across television, voice acting, and stage work, his story is not about the loudest character he played, Bebe Neuwirth as Lilith Sternin. Lilith Sternin never smiled to be liked. She entered scenes like a blade, controlled, precise, and emotionally armored, instantly unforgettable. Bebe Neuwirth was 35 years old when she stepped into Lilith's world on Frasier, carrying the character over from Cheers. What viewers read as icy perfection was, in fact, discipline sharpened by rebellion. Born on December 31, 1958, in Newark, New Jersey, Beatrice Jane Neuwirth grew up pushing hard against authority. She trained in ballet from the age of 5, yet early on recognized the limits of her technique, a realization that quietly fractured a childhood dream. At 13, her defiance became public when she was briefly detained for smoking marijuana. Control for Neuwirth was never obedience. It was self-definition. Her true home became the stage. Broadway rewarded her ferocity with 2 Tony Awards, Sweet Charity and Chicago, where precision, stamina, and danger merged. Television came almost by accident, but Lilith Sternin turned into one of the sharpest comic inventions of her era, earning 2 Emmy Awards and redefining what a difficult woman could look like on screen. Later work, such as Madam Secretary, showed the same authority, stripped of comedy. Behind the accolades, Neuwirth's body carried the cost of decades of dance. 2 hip replacement surgeries forced a reckoning with physical limits, transforming pain into purpose as she helped establish dancer support programs through the Actors Fund. Her personal life followed a quieter arc, an early marriage ending in divorce, then long-term stability with director Chris Calkins, away from spectacle. By 2026, Bebe Neuwirth is 68 years old, still respected as a rare hybrid of dancer, actor, and force of will. With an estimated net worth of around $10 million, built through Broadway and television rather than celebrity excess, her legacy is one of control reclaimed. Edward Hibbert as Gil Chesterton. Gil Chesterton floated through Frasier like a cultivated provocation, ornate diction, theatrical indignation, and exquisite self-regard. Edward Hibbert was 39 years old when he embodied Gil, turning refinement into comic tension rather than parody. Every syllable felt deliberate, every pause sharpened for effect. It was performance built on classical control. Born on September 9, 1955, on Long Island, New York, Hibbert's life was shaped by transatlantic identity. Raised in England by an actor father, he absorbed tradition early, later refining it at the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art. That upbringing gave him polish but also distance. It would become his signature. His career unfolded across theater, television, and voice work. On stage, Hibbert earned acclaim and an Obie Award. On screen, he became recognizable as Gil Chesterton, while lending his voice to Zazu in later Lion King installments. Yet behind the scenes, he built a parallel life as a literary agent, navigating contracts, royalties, and trust. That second career collapsed publicly in 2018. A financial scandal involving massive embezzlement by an employee at his agency left authors devastated and the firm ruined. Though Hibbert denied knowledge of the theft, the fallout was severe, effectively ending his literary career and casting a shadow over years of professional credibility. It was a downfall without punchlines. In 2026, Edward Hibbert is 71 years old, living largely outside the spotlight, remembered fondly for Gil and respected for his voice work and theater past. Never married and openly gay, he has spoken of identity without apology, only understatement. With an estimated net worth of around $4 million, his story carries a familiar irony. A man who perfected satire on power, undone by the invisible mechanics of it. Patrick Kerr as Noel Shempsky. Noel Shempsky drifted through the station like an affectionate oddity, earnest, obsessive, and quietly lonely. Patrick Kerr was 38 years old when Noel began orbiting the world of Frasier, turning background moments into memorable beats. His comedy lingered for many years. Born on January 23, 1956, Kerr's early life was comparatively calm, but his imagination was anything but. Drawn to performance, he trained seriously, earning an MFA from Yale. That discipline would define him, even when the spotlight didn't. Television recognized him as a specialist in precision. Noel on Frasier, a blind pianist on Curb Your Enthusiasm, and Guest turns across Friends, Seinfeld, Will and Grace, and more. Yet the deepest roots of his career lay on stage like Broadway and regional theaters. Kerr's personal truth unfolded without spectacle. Openly gay, he chose honesty over camouflage long before it was fashionable on network TV. His work ethic stayed constant, whether touring My Fair Lady, stepping into The Lion King in Las Vegas, or anchoring off-Broadway productions. By 2026, Patrick Kerr is 70 years old, still working, most recently recurring on the Big Door Prize. With an estimated net worth of around $3 million, largely from steady television and theater work, his legacy isn't a headline role. Tom McGowan as Kenny Daly. Kenny Daly arrived as controlled chaos, the nervous center holding a radio station together by sheer will. Tom McGowan was 39 years old when Kenny became part of the Frasier ensemble, and that maturity showed. His comedy leaned on restraint, timing, and empathy rather than volume. Kenny felt human because McGowan played him that way. Born on July 26, 1959 in Belmar, New Jersey, McGowan's childhood was steady, rooted in routine and community. That calm translated into patience. He pursued training seriously, graduating from Hofstra and the Yale School of Drama, choosing craft before cameras. The stage crowned him early. A Tony nomination for La Bette signaled rare promise, followed by an Obie Award and years of Broadway and touring success. On screen, he became familiar rather than flashy. Everybody Loves Raymond, ER, Veep, The Good Fight. Roles that trusted him to elevate scenes without stealing them. Away from television, McGowan built a parallel life in theater, most famously as the Wizard in Wicked across Broadway, national tours, and the West End. Marriage and family grounded him. 2 children, a long partnership. In 2026, Tom McGowan is 67 years old, still performing, still trusted, still booked. With an estimated net worth of around $5 million, earned through decades of television and Broadway, his story reflects the quiet truth of Frasier. The show endured because actors like McGowan made normalcy compelling and professionalism unforgettable. Harriet Sansom Harris as Bebe Glazer. Bebe Glazer never entered a room quietly. She circled her prey with charm, menace, and absolute conviction, turning greed into performance art. Harriet Sansom Harris was 38 years old when she first embodied Bebe Glazer, sharpening satire into something unsettlingly real. What made the character unforgettable wasn't cruelty alone. It was intelligence weaponized without apology. Born on January 8, 1955 in Fort Worth, Texas, Harris showed theatrical instinct early. She left home young to train at Juilliard, absorbing classical discipline while learning how pressure for perfection can harden the soul. Her upbringing was stable, but demanding, shaping an actor drawn to intensity rather than comfort. Her career bloomed on stage long before television embraced her. Off-Broadway sharpened her edge, and Broadway crowned it with a Tony Award for Thoroughly Modern Millie. When Frasier arrived, Bebe Glazer became a masterclass in controlled chaos, earning cult status, while later roles like Felicia Tillman on Desperate Housewives proved her gift for morally ambiguous women. Behind the sharp dialogue and ferocious timing was a quieter truth. Harris built her reputation through relentless theater work rather than celebrity momentum. She has no children, only craft, repetition, and reinvention. By 2026, Harriet Sansom Harris is 71 years old, still revered for performances that refuse to soften. With an estimated net worth of around $4 million, earned through television, film, and a Tony-winning stage career, her legacy is clear. She made manipulation funny, ambition frightening, and proved that the most dangerous characters are the ones who never doubt themselves. Millicent Martin as Gertrude Moon. Gertrude Moon arrived like a storm from another era, overbearing, unfiltered, and impossible to ignore. Millicent Martin was 66 years old when she stepped into the role of Daphne Moon's mother, turning generational clash into pure comedy. Every entrance felt theatrical, as if the stage itself had followed her into the sitcom. Born on June 8, 1934, in Romford, Essex, Martin was performing almost before she understood the world around her. Pantomime and music hall shaped her childhood, teaching her how to command attention early. That early exposure created confidence, but also a restlessness that would define her adult life. Long before American audiences met Gertrude Moon, Martin was already a star. British television fame came with mainly Millicent, earning her a BAFTA in the 1960s, while Broadway brought Tony nominations and international respect. By the time Frasier embraced her, she carried decades of timing, song, and satire in her voice. Her personal life, however, was less harmonious. 3 marriages, 2 divorces, and repeated reinvention followed her across continents. Each ending forced adaptation, but never retreat. Even as relationships fractured, her career endured, later extending to roles on Grace and Frankie well into her 80s. In 2026, Millicent Martin is 92 years old, one of the rare performers whose career spans pantomime, satire, Broadway, and modern streaming television. With an estimated net worth of around $5 million built over a lifetime of performance, her story is not about decline, it is about survival through reinvention, proof that longevity itself can be a kind of triumph. Behind the laughter and polished dialogue, Frasier hid stories of ambition, loss, reinvention, and survival that most viewers never noticed. Fame came easily for some, while others paid a quieter price away from the spotlight. Which cast member's hidden journey surprised you the most, and whose story do you think deserves to be told next? If you enjoyed Frasier then and now, fame, tragedy, and the lives you never saw, don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us for more untold stories behind the shows you thought you knew.